Welcome to the furtherance of the Book of Mormon commentary. As I've been exploring I reread the first 5 chapters of the Book of Mormon, and as I have re-explored the chapters, I have decided I'm going to go back to the discussion of Laban in the Book of Mormon. And I kind of jumped ahead of myself to discuss the importance and the serious implications of the brass plates. And now it's important to go back and discuss the importance of Laban. As I was looking through my library and finding the various ways and discussions and means and implications of Laban, he's just basically mentioned in pretty much just 1 or 2 chapters. He comes and he goes pretty quick. But the enormous influence of Laban is utterly astonishing on the Book of Mormon. It's just really astonishing. My piles of books kept getting bigger and bigger the more I looked into Laban. From John Welch has a legal perspective. I know Hugh Nibley discusses Laban in light of the Lachish letters and the external archaeologically discovered historical texts that have been found discussing the situation in Jerusalem in Nephi's day. It is so amazing to see the various interesting historical, religious, and political situations that this discussion of Laban in the Book of Mormon brings out, and his influence, the enormous influence of Laban throughout the course of Nephite history and even up into our own church history, has really kind of surprised me. So I want to explore more the ramifications of Laban and discuss the ideas from a religious view, from a legal view, from a historical view, from an archaeological view. There really is seriously fascinating archaeological implications of Laban on the Book of Mormon. And it's astonishing what those implications are. So I'm going to be interested and excited to share with you the different ideas and discussion of Laban and the history of Jerusalem, 600 BC. And there are some wonderful external historical notes that we can discuss and find concerning Laban. So here we go with Laban and Nephi's interaction with him, and the importance of the sword of Laban as a symbol for the Nephite authority of their kings, of their government, of their history, of their laws. It is simply enormously interesting to see how much this one man, who wasn't in the record very much, how much influence he really has and had. Now then, when I was reading in Brandt's commentary in the first volume, he has some wonderful things to say about the importance of the brass plates and the importance about Laban and the influence of Laban on the Nephite record. He says the brass plates proved to be, I'm on page 100, 101, 102. The brass plates proved to be extremely important in the social and cultural history of what would become Nephi's people. First, acquiring the plates establishes Nephi's leadership, which of course it does. And this is the beginning of the fulfillment of the prophecy that Nephi would rule his brothers. So this was important for Nephi especially. And then the large quantity of folk and biblical literature showing the younger son triumphing over the elder is a popular way that we might think of this pattern as the norm. However, the popularity can be accounted for by a fairly universal pressure on the younger sons in the ancient world, because in the ancient world, of course, primogeniture was the standard method of inheritance. So it requires inventive action on the part of the younger sons to make his own way, essentially. Nephi's story may match common themes, but it was nevertheless a very real disruption of the expected social order. In fact, the ascendancy of Jacob over Esau and the ascendancy of Joseph over his brothers stress that these events were exceptions, not the rule, in the ancient world. So we've got to keep that in mind as well. Second, the brass plates were, in my opinion, and this is Gardner speaking here, he says these were Nephi's model for his own plates. They were metal, and they were written in Egyptian, which is the language Nephi used in the record. Third, the plates contained the theology with which the Nephite religion developed. Nephi, and then of course his brother Jacob, and some later leaders quote prophets whose words are found on the brass plates, which is very interesting. We don't lose track of the content of the brass plates throughout the history of the Nephite record. Fourth, the brass plates were a social anchor. They stabilized the Nephite culture by linking it indissolubly to certain practices from the law of Moses. Omni 1:17 makes it clear that Nephite culture remained stable, while the Mulekite culture, being without records, lost both of its language and its faith in the true God. Though this would certainly be true only from the Nephite perspective, of course. We've got to remember, this record is from their biased perspective. Fifth, the brass plates functioned as sacred object. They are part of the set of royal objects passed from Benjamin to Mosiah. We read about that in Mosiah 1:16. It's possible that they were also the stuff of folk legend, because Nephi suggests that these plates of brass should never perish, neither should they be dimmed anymore by time. So there's some of the ideas on the brass plates, and then his discussion comes up into Laban and the importance of understanding the power of the symbol of Laban's sword and the death of Laban, and how this projected Nephi into the role of leader of his community. And because of the sources that Gardner used, of course, I found other sources because I have so many of these that Gardner mentioned, and the ideas that these sources bring out on Laban is very, very interesting, and it's worth looking at. So anyway, let me jump back into my library, and it's colder than I'll get out here right now, so I'm going to go back to my library, and I will continue on with my discussion of the importance of Laban on the Nephite history. Now, I really like how Brant explores on page 101 in the first volume of his commentary. I like how he explores how this story of the sons of Lehi and their adventures with Laban and Zoram, I like how he explores this, because it gives us insights into the actual structure of the Book of Mormon and the manner that Nephi uses to give us the historical, the theological, the political, the religious, the ethical standards that the Book of Mormon has within its pages. I think this is fascinating how he explores how this story is put together. The story of Laban and the brass plates is a structured repetition of events and failures followed by a final success. This is how Nephi structured it. Now, the purpose of reporting those repeated events and attempts is to emphasize their importance rather than simply to recite the facts. So, in putting this together, it focuses our mind on the importance of what is happening. Not just simply, this is what we went and did, this is what we said, this is what happened, here's how we solved the problem. No, this is a structured context. By repeating the elements in similar ways, the story becomes typological and symbolic. And this is the nature of many of the biblical stories. You know, scholars say, well, this didn't really happen, therefore it's not real. Not necessarily. Time out. Hold on here. There is a purpose here. There is serious meaning and implications for us in our lives with understanding how the Scriptures are structured. In telling the story of Laban and the brass plates, Nephi shapes his narrative to make it more than history. And literary critic Richard Dilworth Rust says something very interesting here that I want to share with you. This is on page 102 of the first volume.